signal now for when I'm needed. But when that light hits the sky, it's not just a call. It's a warning to them.
Yes, sir. Welcome to the Gotham Chronicles Beyond the Bat Signal. I am your host, Dominic Unica. Join me as we dive into the depths of Batman's lore, dissecting the Rogues Gallery and uncovering the stories of our iconic vigilante known as the Dark Knight. So, before we get into today's episode, first off, thank you so much for tuning in. I just want to thank every single one of the listeners who have, especially as of late, and even the guests. So big shout out to Ryan Lauer, Rick Sorrenzia, and Pete Vera, who have generously provided some time to come onto the show and just discuss Batman, all things Batman. I love it. But for the listeners out there, thank you very much for tuning in. And for those who are new, welcome. You can catch new episodes anywhere you listen to podcasts. If you want to follow along and follow me, you can follow at an X/Twitter at Beyond the Bat Signal. And if you like what we're doing, then please consider giving us 5 stars and rate and review on any platform where you get your podcasts, such as Apple or Spotify. It goes a long way in supporting the show, and it allows us to be seen, and I would greatly appreciate it. Now, what is today's episode? Well, it's going to be talking about, it kind of gets into like why Batman is the way that he is. And I'm talking about his no killing rule. And what inspired this topic? So I was sitting down during the summertime and I picked up a Legends of the Dark Knight. It was a Batman Duel. And, Ryan Lauer on his show, Batman Book Club, constantly talks about how a lot of these stories are criminally underrated. So anyway, I went ahead, picked one up, and let me tell you how it was a page turner, captivated, just like constantly changing pages. I'm like, where's this going? The art and like the number of writers and artists that were just on this book alone, all right, was incredible to me. It goes on to the topic of, well, why doesn't Batman kill, right? Some people, Zack Snyder, and I'm not bashing him whatsoever, because to be honest, I do like some of the films that he has made. Others, But anyway, he's a big believer that Batman should kill. But we've kind of grown to be like, that's not who Bruce Wayne and Batman is. That's not what he has done. That's not his motive. His motive is to be the opposite. And I wanted to get into somewhat of this book, but I'm not going to focus necessarily on this book. But I am going to take, I guess, parts of it and break it down. So, yeah, we're going to talk today Batman's no killing rule. And the biggest influence is Batman Duel for me. So, first off, let me explain. What's Duel? Like, what's the story all about? So, it's basically exploring Bruce Wayne's internal struggle with his alter ego, right? It is a psychological, I guess, not necessarily a horror, but it does delve deep into the psychology of who Bruce Wayne is and why he does the way he does. And his theme of duality, right? Meaning Bruce Wayne, Batman, and that's his identity. It's the cost of living a double life, right? Like, it's him going out at night, but then having to act as a person, a playboy billionaire by day, right? So, and there's so many different themes that this story, I guess, explores. One being just like, you know, what he's carrying around in this story is it looks like almost like it's a big bag, right? Don't picture like a boxing bag, but it looks like that there's something in it, and they called that the burden. And they constantly coin that throughout the entirety of the story, that he's just carrying around this burden. And he's on a mission. So Batman kind of starts off where he's just rummaging and like traveling through what looks like just something that's just looks like an insane winter storm. And it's like he's on top of the Colorado Rockies. But obviously he's not. He's in a different country, what it seems like. And then it kind of has that feeling of when Bruce Wayne gets, he's like seeking the blue flower and Batman Begins. And picture that, right? And then he's finally looking for Ra's al Ghul. He opens this door, and then his mentor, Descartes, is just waiting for him. And it's like, he's saying to Batman, you've ignored my warning. And again, Batman Begins vibes over here. But like, and I'll quote it, is... he's saying some great violence has marked you. And this is like a flashback. Some great violence has marked you. It gives you your genius for combat technique. Unless you are very lucky, it will destroy you. But for some reason, I'm just hearing Liam Neeson's voice. And Descartes is well aware that Batman pursued his destiny that he set, right? From way back when. And... now he's like, okay, now you're coming to a crossroads, right? Are you going to abandon that destiny that you've chosen and the pride of which it fuels it, which I think is the death of his parents? Become humble, find peace. That's what was said by Descartes. And that's the first choice. And then Batman's like, well, what's the second choice? And embrace the destiny, enter deeply into it. Go further than you have ever gone before until you find what lies at its heart. And then you're like, wow, this whole book is like, well, what's he talking about? And it's just a tale of like, it's a fork in the road. And it's like, where are you going to go? Are you going to live this normal life? Or are you going to go and continue to fulfill that destiny that you chose way back when? So Descartes gives him some sort of tea. And right away, like, it almost seems like Batman's just kind of hallucinating. But before Batman goes on this like little journey, Descartes says, you're forgetting something. He's like, what? He's like, your burden. And then this is where the story goes. And then the story kind of just takes off. And like he's carrying this burden around. And, and the first thing that he's kind of confronting, he drops all the way to the ground. And right away, he's confronted with this like demon. And then the story kind of just does a lot of twists and turns as to like who he's up against. Like very, I guess, fantastical seems to be the buzzword right now. Villains. And, then you have one that's like, not so fantastical as Talia al Ghul. But then she's and it was like a princess that slowly turns into Talia. And then there's even like, there's like a time shift where he's in place shift, because then Batman finds himself at Washington, D.C. And then there's this huge insect that just basically looks like an ant. And then another villain, which looks like Godzilla, but living in the water. And then there's a time jump, but going back in time to probably one of my favorite eras in terms of history, and that's the Prohibition era. And the way that these panels were drawn just has a noir style feel to it. And, where, you're noticing that like there's a lot of guys dressed in suits and fedoras. It kind of just has that like, I don't know, it kind of actually feels like Batman the Caped Crusader, to be honest. But then there's another time jump, and it brings you forward to World War II. And Batman confronts someone I never thought I'd see in a comic book, and probably one of the most evil human beings to ever step foot on this planet, and that's Hitler. And he's confronting him, and then at one point where you see Hitler's tank just fall right to the ground, and Hitler's on the ledge. And at first, the way the panel's drawn, he looks at like fear. He looks back at Batman and has this smirk, and this grin grows bigger and bigger. And the picture slowly transitions into what is the Joker. And the Joker was that burden that he was carrying this whole time. And, he was listening to the conversations that Batman was having while he was hallucinating. And he was like bringing up, like, you muttered someone with the name Talia. And it's like, you know how you got that way? It's because of the cold and the fact that I hit you over the head with a rock. But then, Joker took it as a compliment when Batman called him the Führer, which is Hitler. And Joker, I'll read it right from the panel. Joker's like, really? You thought I was him? How flattering. And I just hear Mark Hamill's voice when he just says, how flattering. Totally comics accurate Joker right there. And it was just, this is the situation that Batman constantly has to face is, to this destiny of one, being Batman, and two, like, not killing. Because just like Batman Begins, I felt like it outlined it so well. Bruce Wayne just goes, like, when Ra's al Ghul or Liam Neeson asks, this man's a murderer. And Bruce Wayne just refuses, says, I will not execute this man. He should be tried, but I will not execute him.
I'm no executioner. Your compassion is a weakness your enemies will not share. That's why it's so important. It separates us from them. You want to fight criminals. This man is a murderer. This man should be tried. By whom? Corrupt bureaucrats? Criminals mock society's laws. You know this better than most.
And why not? And then Bruce Wayne just goes, because it separates us from them. And I think that is just Batman and Bruce Wayne's moral code to not kill. And it's what separates the good from the bad. And I thought Batman Forever also did a pretty good job where, Bruce Wayne's talking to Dick and just saying, like, what happens when you do kill Two-Face? You get him and you kill him. Then what next? And then it just starts to slowly become a habit. And Bruce Wayne and Batman, the character, the whole reason why they became who they were was to prevent all that from happening and to all other people, like losing their parents. And it was just a vow that he made, to stop crime and stop killing. And he will not be one of them. And then by the end of this book, Joker just asks him, so I got to ask you, will you do it? Will you kill me? Release the burden that torments us both? And then Batman's response was, no. Oh, I want to. I've never wanted anything so much, but I won't. Because if I did, I'd be violating the belief that has sustained me for all these years. I believe in the absolute sacredness of human life. I may not really believe in anything else. And then there's more. Like, Batman kind of continues. But if I did as you ask, I'd be no better than my enemies. I'd be the insane adventurer some people are certain I already am. And then, obviously Joker being Joker. How disgustingly noble of you. And it's just, I don't know. Like, it for Batman to not kill, like, as a fan, it's you refer to someone, and you're like, these are this man's moral values. And I think a lot of role models that we look to, that we relate to, and it's like, man, this man stands for this individual, this value, this belief, and it's something that is relatable, right? And with Batman, I feel like that's what captivates audience. I feel like that's why he's one of the most popular superhero characters to ever grace this earth. And one is his relatability and how grounded he is, but his code, right? There's some Marvel characters where, yeah, they do kill. But when we saw Batman kill? And, you have people like Zack Snyder just kind of saying, like, who gives a crap? Like, that's old school thinking. I disagree. I am a big believer that Batman should not be killing, right? Because for years, this has been his moral code. This is what motivates him. And the burden that he carries around is, he's got to continue being Batman and not having the life that he probably wants to have, having a family, having a wife, having a child, and just, not having to fight day in and day out. But this is a vow that he made to his parents, something that created him, and I think was a traumatizing moment in Bruce's life, where from that point on he was like, this will never happen to another human being again. Now, when it comes to the story itself, and again, all connecting around two different ideologies, where Henry Ducard and Batman, do believe in justice, but how they go about it is very different. One believes that they should kill, and another is in the opposite end, where it's like, no, there's justice, where it's like, we will put them in jail and they should be tried, right? And it's about also, like, when you look at the storyline itself, right? Henry Ducard, where, like, it's a confrontation about intellect and ideology, right? How two people think, right? And two vastly different ideologies, and how they, and it's no different, right? Like, we have a lot of people that, have opinions and how they go about doing things, and you can agree and disagree, right? Where Henry Ducard tries to push Batman beyond his ethical boundaries. We see it in Batman Begins. So if you're not familiar with this story, that's okay. Batman Begins will give you, I think it's like to me, it would be like the alternative of watching who Henry Ducard is, right? Just like taunting him, and like, there's Gotham's corruption, right? And it's like, these people, they should pay for everything that they've done, right? And where I believe that Batman believes in justice. These people should be going to jail and learning from their mistakes, because he believes in a second chance, right? With Ducard, because Henry Ducard, in what seems to be like this story, was his Batman's mentor, right? So, he doesn't come off as insane. He's not motivated by greed or power, none of that. Again, going back to the word of ideology, Henry Ducard believes genuinely in his own form of justice. So that makes him, to me, a dangerous individual, where Batman has his own arguments as to why he disagrees with Ducard, right? Ducard represents what, like, Batman could have become if Batman allowed himself to be consumed with all this anger and hate, and then all of a sudden just go on a killing spree. Because I think it'd be really easy for Batman just to go out there and kill, right? So there's a dynamic between two individuals and two different ideologies. And keep in mind, Ducard was Batman's mentor for part of this. And it highlights, like, Batman's morals, his code. And we even kind of see that as well with The Dark Knight, right? Where Joker's just trying to push him to just break his one rule. And Batman just refuses, right? And that's the burden that he has to constantly carry. You see it with Jason Todd, where, that Robin, Joker killed him, beat him to a pulp and killed him. And later on, when Jason comes back, he was so upset that it's like, you didn't have to kill the Penguin, Two-Face, those guys are, but, the one guy that killed me, and you couldn't even take him out. And Batman still, and if you go through the comics after Jason Todd's death, he went through a rough patch, depression. He changed. And Batman just believed that, that is not who he is, right? He's got his own morals where he refuses to steep to that level, because then he becomes one of them. As I sit here and just look at the last page of this book, where Batman, the last thing he says to Joker is, I refuse to give you the satisfaction of seeing me fail, and that makes you absolutely miserable, doesn't it? And it's like, for as battered and beat up as Batman is, and he could take out Joker and that would be the end of it. But still, it's like he stays on his path, his journey, and that's the burden, right? Is like, yes, these criminals might get released in a corrupt Gotham, but for him, his moral code is, this is the way I have to do things. Because keep in mind, he watched someone kill his parents right in front of him in cold blood, and from that day forward, he says, I will never allow this to ever happen again. If I can save one life, then I will. If I have to become one, shoot and kill someone else, then I'm just like them, right? And, I'm going to actually share the Zack Snyder clip right now. And I don't want to bash Zack Snyder. I think he's a fantastic filmmaker. I do love Justice League, his version of it. I do like BVS. But, the way he does his own killing, it wasn't necessary. It really wasn't, right? Using his Batmobile to go out and kill people. I mean, come on, right? It didn't really have to be, it didn't have to go that way. But, Zach has his own vision, and by all means. But let me share the clip, and I want to briefly touch upon this, and then I'm going to move forward.
Batman can't kill, right? So Batman can't kill is canon. And I'm like, okay, well, the first thing I want to do when you say that is I want to see what happens. And they go well, don't put him in a situation where he has to kill someone. I'm like, well, that's just you're protecting your God in a weird way, right? You're making your God irrelevant.
Now, I completely see where Zach is coming from, because he's like, let's try something completely different. I just think that for what Batman stands for and who he is as in Batman the individual, and what he was made up, right? People can say, oh, well, it happened in the comics. Yeah, but Dark Knight Returns is not necessarily canon, or and then you look at stuff that happened in 1939 and then 1940. But then the story evolved, right? And then the shape of who Batman came to be evolved, right? So I would say that there's way more stories of Batman not killing, and I'm talking way more stories than Batman killing, right? That's just who he's known for. This is if there had to be a character Bible, Batman, the number one thing is no killing, right? You look at the Nolan films and it stays true to who he is. And I'm not picking on Zack Snyder. We all know Michael Keaton did kill, right? And it's but there's always this constant debate. And then when I was reading this book, and I'm like, man, this just sums up Batman's perfectly, right? He had, when I was reading Duel, it looked like he was on a mission. This guy was hallucinating, but it was, I almost think that throughout his journey, and you should read it. Not sure if you can find it on Hoopla. I tried looking, and I couldn't find it, so I actually ended up getting it on eBay for a very decent price. But I'm pretty sure you can go to your local comic shop and find it. Dark Knight, Legends of the Dark Knight. But when you look at what Duel is, right? This burden, quote unquote, is just magnified, right? There's a question that Batman has to look at. Is this mission just way too high, right? He's hallucinating. There's nightmares that he's experiencing. And it's suggesting that his psyche is just buckling right beneath his feet, and that there's pressure of being Batman. That's the burden of the pressure of being Batman night in and night out. And at one point, it's just how do I just let go of it and choose the option one and just live a relaxing life, or do I choose option two, right? And it's difficult to live like that, right? And let people in. Like, yeah, he's let in Dick Grayson. He's let in Jason Todd, Tim Drake, Barbara Gordon, right? Like, he has let them in. But, like, the Batman, this is his mission. This is his calling, right? Like, you know, his life was, I don't want to say spared, but, like, you know, he wasn't killed. And he's like, you know, I'm going to use my experience for good. Now, another reason for Batman's no killing rule, like, you see the established relationship that Batman and Jim Gordon have. Batman, although a vigilante, still operates within the law, right on the line, but he does operate and respect the law, right? Killing him would put him above the law. And that's not a place that he wants to be. He wants to lead as an example, right? And I do believe that he's a symbol for hope, where I think, you know, and it is like, you know, Bruce Wayne and outlines that to Alfred, you know, as a symbol. He can be incorruptible. But, like, the whole story about the Nolan trilogy was, you know, Batman was a symbol that anyone could be Batman, right? Anyone could be hope and doing things the right way. And that's why he gave up his mantle, lived up his life, but gave up his, like who he was, but gave it to Robin, or, you know, John Blake. And, you know, as like, here's everything you need. It's the Batcave, the suit, the Batmobiles, everything, right? And I just think that, like, who Batman is, it's like, you know, if he could be an influence, right? And you look at that as, you know, in the Dark Knight, where, you know, people are dressing up now as Batman, and it was not exactly what he had in mind, right? But, like, he wanted to influence others too, and inspire people to do good, right? Turn the other corner. Try not to take an avenue where, you know, you're going to choose killing or be a criminal, right? Rather, maybe it's like, you know what, you take action. Maybe you join the police force, or you fight against crime, rather than going around and killing people and creating chaos and madness, right? Trying to have control, and looking at Batman as a symbol, as a role model, and being like, I want to be like that guy. And I think, like, you know, you look at, why is he the most popular character? I constantly circle back to, well, just look at this guy. Like, you know, he's so relatable to so many human beings, right? The man has self-control, and he is, you know, very grounded. We're just like him. I know, watching the end of Batman the Caped Crusader, he holds a gun, and you're like, wow. Like, he's at a point where it's like, is he going to kill this guy? Is he actually going to shoot him? And obviously he wastes the bullets all around the guy, you know, shoots all around him, but doesn't shoot at him. And he throws that gun into the ocean, lake, whatever, right? Doesn't kill. Do you think he's pushed and said, you know what, maybe I do want to kill him? Yeah. But I don't think he actually wants to kill anybody. You know, you try to think about it, it's like, you know, I just think that to have someone kill, they wouldn't be in their right mind, right? And I think that Batman is, you know, Joker kind of highlights where it's like, maybe all you need is just one big push. But that one big push, Batman's experienced it multiple times and never crossed that line, right? And I think that with Batman, you know, if he does one kill, you know, there is that fear of losing control, where Batman is well aware of the anger and the darkness that's within him. But if he ever crosses that line and kills once, he fears that he may lose control in what he fights against, and doesn't want to become one of them. Okay, so that pretty much brings us to the end of this podcast. A couple of announcements, actually. So with, I guess, from now up until November, I'm going to be reviewing each episode of the Penguin series that is airing on HBO. Reviews are popping up, and already Rotten Tomatoes giving it a certified fresh, which is pretty sweet. I'm looking forward to this show. The vibe I'm getting is Tony Soprano or Sopranos all over it. They said it's going to be violent. It's going to be hard R, and I'm all here for it. I think my wife's going to be joining me to review this. So kind of get like one that's like a deep Batman fan, and then there's another where it's just general audience, kind of getting her perspective, which will be, I guess, a pretty nice little dynamic. And then the other thing that I'm going to be doing is trying to incorporate, because we're hitting Halloween season, and I feel like incorporating some sort of the long Halloween into the podcast is also going to be included going forward. And then obviously we're going to do a couple more deep dives. Like this one was more about, I was looking at the comic and I'm like, man, like Batman's no killing rule, pretty much, it just fascinates me. I'm a big believer that it's like, like you shouldn't kill. And to each their own. Everyone's got opinions. Hey, if you disagree, that's cool too. Like, I'm always open to hearing people that disagree and why he should kill, right? Zack Snyder does have his own opinions, and I actually listened to it and I was like, okay, but he's a filmmaker, right? He's going to be creative. He's going to be different. And I don't fight him on that, right? I was just actually looking at this book and I'm like, heck, like, let's do a deep dive on it, right? Because this guy, like the fat thing that I loved about this book of Batman Duel, where he's just carrying a burden around. And it's like, well, what is this burden? And there's so much that's on the weight of this man's shoulders, right? And it goes deep into the psyche of who Batman is. Anyway, that is pretty much all for today. Pay attention for going forward. And I know with I'm assuming Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, we'll be dropping a review on the Penguin. And where can you find me? X/Twitter @BeyondBatSignal. Or you can send a comment, question to my email, beyondthebatsignal@gmail.com. And please review the show, give it 5 stars if you like it, as it helps spread the word, and share it with your friends, family. Now, that is all for today. And this is Beyond the Bat Signal, signing off.